Okay, and then I'm going to pull up our presentation. All right. Now can you see everything, Julie? Got it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. All right. So let's give it a few more minutes here, and then we'll get started. But yeah, for right now, we'll just chill. And guys, we do have this set up as a webinar just because we had so many people sign up for this. We kind of thought it would be easier if we did it as a kind of a webinar format. So if you have questions, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A options down at the bottom. There's naturally lots of sirens going on outside of my house right now, so apologies in advance. Yeah.
What's going on in your neighborhood?
And I don't know, I'm not sure. We'll see. But I think it's just because Clayton's so near.
Yeah. Give it one more minute.
I know we have a lot of other folks that are maybe outside of St. Louis for this chat, but we are definitely into summer weather here in St. Louis. It's hot out there.
It's so hot. It's like 90 degrees.
Yeah, not into
Fahrenheit
it
today. Just give it a couple more minutes, just in case people are joining late.
Yeah.
I went to the T-Rex incubator downtown in St. Louis. So for those of you who don't know, that we have a startup incubator in St. Louis called T-Rex, and the company I'm working for now has an office there. But they're slowly starting to open back up. The T-Rex staff is there, like signing in as guests, and looks like some people are starting to go back and use that office space, but definitely still mostly deserted
for right now. Yeah, no, that's good though. That's good. I saw Brennan's in Midtown. They're opening back up as well for.
Oh my gosh, isn't that where we wanted to have to have this coffee chat at Brennan's?
Yeah, we did.
Mm-hmm.
So it can still happen. We'll be meeting each other in real life again.
Yes.
Soon enough.
But now we get to have I guess reach a lot more people today. But it's virtual.
Very true.
Okay.
You looking good?
Yeah, we've got 20 people on now.
Okay.
Do you want to give it one more minute, or you can go ahead?
Yeah, we can get started. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Julie Hammers. I'm one of the co-leads for Women in Product here in St. Louis, and I'm joined by Julie Chang, who's the other co-lead. Julie's recently joined the team at Balto. I'm a product manager for Help Scout. And today we're going to do kind of a brief chat and a Q&A, and then also talk about a few things about the St. Louis chapter in St. Louis. So getting started. Yeah, here's today's agenda. We're gonna do our chat, and then we'll go ahead and put your questions in during the chat. Julie Chang is gonna be looking at everybody's questions, and then when I'm kind of done talking, we'll have some Q&A, and then Julie will be following up with just some kind of action items for our chapter. All right, so let's get started.
I'll go ahead and turn my video and microphone off too, and then when we get to Q&A, I'll jump back in and kind of compile everyone's questions. So yeah, just put your questions in the Q&A spot and we'll get to them right at the end.
Awesome. Okay, so I work at Help Scout. And what is Help Scout? Help Scout is a fully remote company. I'll turn on our little, whoops, come back here. There we go. Now we got our wave. Is a fully remote company of over 100 people in over 80 countries. We're united by a passion to deliver delightful customer experiences, and that kind of drives everything we do. And we're also hiring. So that's a little bit about Help Scout. So let's get started. So I've learned a lot about working with remote teams over the last few years, but today I'm going to focus on three main areas: team relationships, tools, and processes. Let's start with your team. On any given day, I am working with engineers and designers from Poland to Australia. So how do I make sure that everyone is united and communication lines are clear? So a few rules of the road. The first one is do not default to sync communication, aka meetings. Many product managers are used to working meetings to get things done. On remote teams with conflicting time zones, that often makes that impossible. Instead, use chat or email for day-to-day communication. You can even record videos for your teammates to watch later in their time zone. Important information like decision logs should be captured in an accessible place as part of the spec or PRD. Alternately, there's also the risk of too much async communication. So if you've ever read the comments section, you know it's sometimes hard for people to pick up on nonverbal cues if someone's upset or whatever without seeing someone's face. If a conversation with your team is getting tense or the thread in Slack is 50 layers deep, encourage folks to jump on a quick video call to sort things out. Often that provides the quickest resolution when things are blocked. What's the right ratio? For me, it's about 70% async and about 30% sync, but experiment and find the right ratio that works for you. The next rule to cover is talking about explicit versus implicit. I'm not talking about hip hop lyrics. Since I mentioned before, remote teams tend towards async communication. We try to have everything written down clearly in a space that people can find it. Our Slack posts are much longer than co-located teams, and I tend to draft and edit posts I share with my teams. You should be as clear as possible when making requests. Our company also keeps a detailed wiki that captures everything from HR docs to product practices. It does mean that there's a lot of information to onboard, but the benefit is the information isn't a person you have to contact for help. The next concept to keep in mind is that people's impact is oftentimes greater than their intent. As previously mentioned, without those nonverbal cues, team members can often interpret the same information differently. Try to assume good, but ask questions. And don't be afraid to bring others into the conversation for clarity. Also, check in regularly with members of your team, even if they don't report to you. So designers, engineers, etc., to build those relationships. On a remote team, imposter syndrome is real. So it's important to honor those creating positive impact on your team. Try establishing a Slack channel just for shoutouts and virtual cheers. Help Scout has a team building event called Ficas. A bot schedules random meetings between team members across the company. It's a chance for us to talk about things other than work catch up and just generally have fun. The final point is don't drop into DMs. Slack has a great hidden feature that will tell you how many of your company's conversations happen in DMs versus public channels. And you'll not be surprised to know that most companies have a tendency towards DM. Although your first instinct, maybe go directly to the person you want to talk to, avoid it if you can. On remote teams, DMs lead to knowledge silos, miscommunication, and more. Help Scout has a mix of private and public channels. We use prefixes to help team members find the information they're looking for. For example, P-advanced permissions, where P- is a project channel. So by following these 4 rules, you'll be well on your way to seamless remote team communication. Next, I'm going to talk about remote product practices briefly. There's a lot I could cover here, but just for the scope of this chat, I'm going to keep it pretty lean. So to start off with research. So we can't go see people in person. It's not usually something we can do. So our customer interviews are all done over video, and we track customer requests using Help Scout and Jira. And those inputs are combined with data from our metrics to research potential new features. Next, after research, the product team crafts a brief that focuses on the problem to be solved and the initial scope for the feature. Questions on the brief are submitted asynchronously, like I talked about, and the team makes a decision whether or not to pick up the work. From here, we move into discovery. And since we don't have an office for project kickoffs, we do a video call, we use Figma, and a Slack project channel to get everyone working together on the project. Once the solution is finalized, the spec is the next thing that happens. It's widely shared in the company, so it's important that it is easily scannable by all functions looking for information on the feature. All our specs are crafted in Dropbox paper. Before a feature is getting ready to ship, we craft a release plan, so it's clear to everyone who is responsible for what, who we're shipping to, and how we fix things if they break. Avoid making release decisions in Slack as it leads to miscommunication. Finally, after things go out, you'll often feel or often want to test or observe how your customers are using a new feature. Along with analytics, try using Full Story or Hotjar to anonymously observe behavior. Okay, now moving on. These are some of the tools that I use to get things done on a daily basis. I won't go through all of these because obviously some of them are familiar to you, but I'll point out some of the ones that I think are kind of novel. We use Slab for our company wiki. So that captures a lot of the HR docs and then all of our kind of engineering practices as well. We use Dropbox paper, like I mentioned, just because of how well it works with design to capture kind of mock-ups and wireframes. We personally use Google Sheets for our product roadmap, but I also highly endorse using Product Board or Airtable. Loom is super awesome for recording those videos that I mentioned that you can share in Slack with folks. So you can share a screen and kind of just do a quick walkthrough if you want to describe something that you're working on with folks. Miro used to be called Real-Time Board, but Miro is, if you love the experience of having like stickies and the traditional kind of like design thinking kind of workflow, Miro is a great tool for that. You can use that to whiteboard and then also kind of work on things like estimating kind of the risk or impact of a particular feature with the team. And Figma, as I mentioned before, is a newer design tool that allows teams to work in real time in the browser. So it is very popular with design teams, but it's also helpful for engineers and product managers as well to be able to have access to this design files and make comments where before, like, it was very hard for folks to kind of do that unless you were using InVision or something like that. So to wrap up, these are just a few extra resources. The Help Scout blog and the Zapier blog have a lot of great info. Remotive.io is a great job board for remote positions. And finally, Remote, the book by 37 Signals, is literally the book on remote work. And yeah, there's a lot of great information there. So that is my quick spiel on remote work as a product manager. And now I'm going to pop over to Q&A. Julie, are there any comments or questions on the Q&A yet?
I don't see any yet. Everyone feel free to go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A section. We'll give it a few minutes, but someone says, can you please pull up the last slide with the blogs? So we can just go back to that one. Lots of new tools. Someone says, are you going to send out the recording and slides?
Yes, we can do that.
We can do that.
Yeah.
If Help Scout is okay with this as well. So yeah, if you are registered on Eventbrite, I will email it to you there. If you're not, let us know. We have a slide with our chapter email on it later, so you can email us there. So yeah, any other questions so far? I'll just go to
I'll go back to that tool slide just for a minute, just so in case someone wanted to screenshot those or anything.
Okay, we've got two more questions.
Okay.
Where do you document product decisions? So I think you had a part about the release plan and who is responsible. Like, where do you document those decisions?
Yeah, usually the decision log lives in the spec document. So in Dropbox Paper, as part of our spec, we'll have a scope part of the spec. And usually there's often a kind of a technical breakdown and a kind of a question section or edge cases. And we usually document any changes or decisions that we've made along the way in that part of the spec. But oftentimes, sometimes those decisions do kind of come up organically in Slack. So it's kind of up to the team to remember, like, hey, we just made a decision here. Let's go back to the spec and make sure it's documented. We always want to assume that someone might not be in the room and might miss some context. So going back to that idea of being explicit versus implicit, you want to make sure that you document as much information as possible.
Okay, we've got several more questions. Let's see if I can combine any of these. Okay. Could you talk more about how you involve your team in doing remote discovery research, especially when you're synthesizing the findings and identifying next steps in terms of product decisions?
Sure. So often my conspirator, like person I work with closely, is usually the designer on the team. Sometimes I also involve people on our customers team at Help Scout. We have a position called product specialist, and they're kind of like the liaison between product and our customer service team. And so they have a wealth of knowledge about the product. So usually in the kind of research phase or discovery phase, our designers will be kind of working on things in Figma. They'll be sharing those prototypes in Slack. And we'll use often they'll have what's called a work in progress doc. That is also in Dropbox Paper, so that you can kind of see things as they iterate through them, and the team can kind of talk through the designs. In terms of going back to like the research stage, we just try to share as much as we can. all the interviews that we have, we keep in our wiki. And then we also try to share in our kind of like product team channel any of the, like the research or findings that we do get. But yeah, in terms of kickoffs, we still try to have like Zoom calls like between like the engineering lead and the design lead and the PM to kind of like get things started with discovery. And I find that like having a dedicated project channel really helps because we have team channels, but those can get kind of noisy with a lot of other like context and like bugs that happened and other things. But having a dedicated project channel that is kind of just about like collaborating on that piece, I think really helps too.
Awesome. We've got a couple questions about like interacting with people. So one, as a manager, are there any tools that you use to help you manage people better, especially with one-on-ones? And then two is if you just have people kind of drop off the face of the earth and then just suddenly like aren't available, but that wasn't really a problem when they were in person. How do you handle that in a remote setting?
Yeah, so I will say that we have our engineers have engineering coaches that they report up to. So the engineers have their one-on-ones with their engineering coach. But I will say like the for just meeting with folks with my team, I just generally try to keep the one-on-ones on a like consistent schedule, especially like with functions like outside of like product and engineering, just so people kind of stay in the loop outside of our team, like in marketing or in sales. And also like those speakers that I mentioned are really helpful to kind of like just get to know people because you don't have those natural like water cooler moments to like really get to know folks. We do a lot of exercises that help Scout though to kind of help onboard people. We have a lot of kind of just off topic kind of channels that kind of helps people to kind of open up a little bit more. And I find that like as long as you kind of keep people talking, they're less likely to kind of drop off. But I haven't had a personally, I haven't had a huge problem with people kind of going off the radar. I think it's kind of a misnomer that remote workers, you never know when they're working, that kind of thing. For dedicated remote teams, I think it's been actually very consistent that people actually tend to work a little bit more. And so I've never usually had a problem. The only thing that we really have to work with is time zones. And sometimes when something critical comes up and the person that we need is in a different time zone, that can be a challenge. But often we just try to reach out to other team members or other parts of the org to try to work through a situation if we need to. But I'll be honest, Australia is the hardest time zone to work with.
Mm-hmm. And just to follow up, someone asked, I don't think everyone's familiar with the term coach. Is that different from a manager? And then I had a question about the tool you mentioned for building more like water cooler type conversations. I've heard of Donut. Is it similar to that? But I wasn't familiar with the tool you just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. For FICAs, the bot that we use is Donut. But there are other ones out there. Some people even use like spreadsheets just to kind of set it up. I personally have done, especially when we've been going into quarantine, I've just been offering up like let's just have a happy hour just to kind of get together. Can you go back to the other question? What was that again? It was about they weren't sure about the term coach, right? That's right. Okay. So yeah, coach. Oh, I think Julie just froze. Okay. Well, I think everyone can still hear me okay. A coach is